Hi, I'm Alexis. Today I'm going to be telling you about how my family sent me to live with my grandparents so that they could be happy. To start off, I had a really bad childhood. My mother and father had always fought, but I was too little to understand what any of it meant. I didn't understand why I could only see my dad a number of times a week. I didn't understand why my mom and dad stopped saying I love you. I didn't understand why Dad cried any time we left his apartment. Why was he always so sad? One day I found out that my dad was going to Korea for a year. He was in the military and going to Korea was his job. I was devastated. I loved my father and I always felt like our bond was stronger than me and my mother's. No matter how much I begged him to stay, he left. I remember my grandmother, from my mom's side, telling me, "A year isn't that long. I promise it'll be over before you know it." But how could that be true? A year was still a year, no matter how much I tried to let it fly by. So it was just me and my siblings alone with my mom. I was the middle child. At the time I was 7. My younger sister Kayla was 6, my little brother Alec was 2, and my older brother Andrew was 12. It didn't take very long for my mother to start acting odd. She started bringing many men over to our house and drinking a lot. At this time, my parents weren't divorced yet. So why was my mother bringing other men home? Then my mother began neglecting us. She would leave us home alone or bring us to baby sisters who lived in very unsafe places. A lot of times she wouldn't feed us. She would drag us around to men's houses and leave us in the car while she was inside for long periods of time. Then the hitting started. She had this belt with diamonds on it that she would hit us with, often on the back, for little things. Things stayed this way for the whole year my dad was gone. Andrew is my half-brother, so he lived mostly with his real dad during all of this. He still visited my mother, however he didn't like it. Maybe I was just too little to understand what a brotherly relationship was. But Andrew was my world at that time. He seemed to always be there when my mom wasn't, and he cooked us food even if he wasn't very good at it. I remember always wanting to be around him. When he went to his dad's house, out with his friends, in his bedroom while he was watching movies. I even remember him begging me to leave him alone. What can I say? I felt safe around him. One day, my mother, my siblings, and I were getting in the car after visiting Andrew's dad. Andrew followed us to the car, hugged each of us, and said, "Thank you for being my mother," to my mom as she got in the car. I was confused. Was this some kind of goodbye? After that, Andrew stopped coming around. Mom told me he was going to permanently live with his dad, meaning no more Andrew. I was heartbroken. I had lost my father and now I was losing the only other person I felt safe around. Soon, later on, I told my father what was happening when he called us from Korea. He was shocked. I hoped with all my heart he could do something and he promised he would. He did, but it was a very slow process. People in suits came to my school and asked me questions concerning my mother and her living conditions. My mom told us to tell them what she called the truth, which was that she always fed us and took good care of us. As much as I wanted to do this, I just couldn't lie to these people. My sister did, but I didn't. I just wanted to see my dad and brother again. After many months, my dad gained full custody of Alec, Kayla, and me. We moved to Tennessee with my grandparents from my dad's side. I was very sad that Andrew couldn't come with us to Tennessee, but my dad told me that Andrew had to live with his dad. I was excited to finally see my dad again, but he was different now. He wasn't as happy and caring as he used to be. In fact, he tended to push everyone away from him. He always seemed sad. He was there to parent, but that was all. My grandmother usually looked after us the most. My dad promised that he would never let me or my siblings go back to live with my mom. I believed him. It didn't take long for my diagnosis to pop up. In 2013, I was diagnosed with ADHD. In 2015, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. In 2017, I was diagnosed with PTSD. Medication and therapy became part of my day-to-day life, even though I didn't like it. I had problems behaving at home and paying attention. I often woke up during the night because of nightmares and go to my parents' room to wake up my grandmother. She would often tell me everything was okay and go back to sleep. I had to have a 504 plan at school because I was having trouble paying attention. Me and my grandmother often argued about little things, and I'll admit I could get aggressive. I just couldn't help it. It was like I wasn't in control of my own life. In 2017, my dad told us he had met a girl named Brenda. He had met her at a Halloween party hosted by a friend my dad had made at one of my softball games. The only problem was that Brenda lived in Missouri and we lived in Tennessee. However, she did visit once or twice. When I first met her, she seemed really nice and was fairly attractive. She took us out to Dave & Buster's and bought us cinnamon rolls on her drive to Tennessee. She bought gifts that were fairly meaningful for children she'd never met. Even better, I saw a part of my dad that I hadn't seen in a long time. He was so happy when she was around and made everyone laugh. When my dad told us they were getting married, I was so happy. We were going to move in with Brenda the following year. However, my grandparents weren't coming. I'd love to say that I was sad that they weren't coming, but I wasn't. I was kind of happy. My grandmother and I always fought, and she often complained about the smallest things. Better yet, Brenda had 3 cats. I love cats, and I even had one of my own at the time, Charlie. So a new house, a cool stepmom, 3 new cats, and a chance to get away from my grandparents. It sounded like a win-win. However, when we moved in together, everything turned into a win for everyone but a loss for me. Brenda didn't like that I was different, so she tried her best to avoid me. She was often rude and lashed out at me for the smallest things. Now, I'm not going to say that I was 100% innocent all the time, but I'm not going to say I was 100% guilty either. Even if I was, nobody deserves what Brenda did to me. Many times she would get in my face and tell me that I was just like my mother, a lowlife, a piece of trash, who would never be anything in life. She would grab me and swing at me, all while my dad sat in horror. Sometimes he would quietly say, "All right, that's enough." But he wouldn't say it loud enough for it to be effective. Once Brenda took out all the light bulbs out of the room and locked me in there. It was pitch black, and if I tried opening the door, she could grab me. I was mostly in my room. Brenda didn't like me around at all. I didn't have a TV or a phone, just library books. At first my dad brought my meals to me, but then that stopped because Brenda said he was giving me too much attention. Anytime I tried talking to my dad about what was going on, he would tell Brenda everything I said. People in a relationship aren't supposed to keep secrets from each other, he would tell me. Brenda convinced my dad that I was trying to split them apart and that I wasn't to be trusted. My dad believed her and stopped trusting me. I didn't have anyone to talk to. Not my dad, not my grandparents, not even my siblings. Brenda had convinced them that I was trying to take their happiness away too. I was alone in my little room all the time with no one to talk to but myself. I would often write down my deepest and darkest thoughts on paper and hide them so that they would never escape my mind. This was my way of talking to someone. However, Brenda would always find these papers and read them aloud, often with my siblings listening and tell me I'm crazy. She would laugh and mock me until I was in tears. In October of 2018, my dad dropped a huge bombshell. He told me that he wasn't my real dad. I was in total shock. I didn't know what to say. He had been lying to me for 14 years, and why? He told me that my mother called him while he was stationed in Afghanistan and told him that she had been raped. I didn't and still don't believe she was raped. She was probably sleeping around with men just like she was when my dad was in Korea. He explained that he still wanted to be my dad. I didn't know what to say. He sat in my room crying while I just sat in shock, taking the whole story in. He told me he was sorry. I was sorry too. I couldn't help but think that if I had just been aborted, my dad's life would have been so much easier. I was and am a mistake, and now my dad was trying to fix it. He told me he didn't know who my real father was. My whole world was collapsing right in front of me. You would think that Brenda would have been nicer to me, but she still stayed the same. She even grew worse. She would often tell me that everyone would be better off if I was gone and how happy everyone was when I wasn't around. I truly felt like she wanted me to kill myself, just so she wouldn't have to put up with me. In the summer of 2019, Brenda wanted to send me back to live with my mom. She said I wasn't welcome in her house. Even though my dad promised he would never send me back, he didn't care. He wanted me gone too. My grandparents stepped in and scolded my father for even agreeing to send me back. They decided that they would send me to live with my grandparents until they could find a boarding school for me to live in. Now I live with my grandparents. I know I won't stay here forever, but I try not to think about what comes next. My grandparents treat me so well, and I feel like my prayers were answered. I'm still struggling with nightmares and flashbacks of everything.